everybody's engaged, everybody's rowing in the same direction. And that's where you're really getting the traction and growing your business.
And then thoughtfully gone through to go, okay, well, what's the highest leverage for this year, this quarter? What actually moves the needle?
Oh my God, you found nirvana. You're going to solve all of our problems. I tell people there is no magic pill here.
So most business owners struggle, and the result is that they get stuck working in their business and not on it. And the business fully depends on them. And without them, the business would likely disappear within weeks. So in this episode, I sat down with Brian Blatchley, who is a franchisee and certified EOS implementer. So EOS, if you haven't heard of it, it's also known as the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it's used by, get this, over 190,000 business owners around the world. Now, Brian and I walk through EOS and its 6 key components of any business and how you can transform them in your business. We talk about how to hire and elevate the right people on your team, the importance of company scorecards, and how to transform the way that you have meetings. Now, Brian specializes in working with businesses with 10 or more people. So if you want to have a free 90-minute strategy and education session with Brian, his contact information is in the description below. With that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Franchise Empire Show. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, and building your empire doesn't happen overnight. My name is Tariq Johnson, and owning franchises is what helped me go from employee to employer and start building my empire for my family. So this podcast is for you, the empire builders. For those of you who want to build something that stands the test of time. This is for those of you who are crazy enough to believe that you can make the dream in your head come to life. This podcast is all about bringing you real people who are building real empires so you can get inside their mind and heart and get proven strategies and actionable insights that will catapult you to build, grow, and scale your empire. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Franchise Empire Show. I'm here with Brian from EOS. Thanks for coming on, man. I'm excited for this conversation.
I've been really looking forward to this. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So let's just dive in, which is, I'm a huge fan of EOS. In my last corporate gig, I served on the leadership team, and they fully used EOS and had adopted in the business. That was my first exposure, and I found it really fascinating. For people that might be living under a rock and don't know that EOS is used with 190,000 business owners all over the world, can you just explain what is EOS and how does it work?
Certainly. And by the way, my last corporate role was running a high-end wedding catering company with 400 employees and 5 locations. And that's where I was introduced to EOS, and we ran the company on EOS. So I don't just teach it, I've actually done the work of being the integrator in a very busy company. EOS is a simple set of practical tools that help small to medium-sized privately owned companies to better maximize what they want to get out of their company. And let me give you a better overview. There's a lot of people out there who have a great idea on how to deliver a service better, or they're building the widget better. What they end up doing, and in a real life example, I had a company that had 2 guys that were elevator repairmen, right? Good elevator repairmen. They started their own company, and they looked up 3 years into it and realized they had 25 other elevator repairmen working for them, and they had no idea really how to structure the day-to-day operations of their business. And we're very open and honest about that. So what EOS is a human operating platform. Okay, it is not software, although there is software, and we can talk about that later to help you better manage your process. It is allowing you to make sure that the business operates effectively. We are completely industry agnostic, and what we do as implementers is help companies overlay their unique business onto this platform, and this platform allows great decision making, clarity of vision, accountability, process driven, And what we say is traction, which is the name of the book that the whole thing is named after, written by a guy by the name of Gino Wickman. So it's discipline, it's accountability. Three things we do with clients when we work with them. One is getting a clear vision. A lot of small to medium sized companies, when I ask the question, where are you going? What do you want to be in 5, 10, or 20 years? And they don't really have a cohesive answer to that. So it's really hard for you to drive a company forward and the people that are working for you to know where you're driving, right? If you don't have a clear vision. So we do that foremost early in the process. Traction is the discipline and accountability pieces that are all part of the EOS model. And then team health, because what we talk to our clients about is there's two things. It's being healthy and strong, right? They're two components of your management style. Strong is the strategy, the tactics that you use to run your business. And most business owners spend about 95% of their time focused on that. What they don't spend any or little time on is the team health component. Team health has to do with having open, honest, trusting, and that's key, trusting communication among the leadership team. If you can then leverage that lack of attention to that team health piece, which is where we spend time with them, building that trust, you're able to then better have those tough conversations among the leadership team, put the real problems on the table and work to solve them. So again, it's a simple set of practical tools. There's 6 key components that we work with our clients to focus on. And if you just focus on getting good at those 6 key components, in 18 to 24 months, you're probably going to be running on all cylinders within your organization.
Yeah, awesome. And what's interesting to me is I feel that like traction in EOS is it's one of those things that it's best experienced, right? Where it's some things it's hard to fully understand the power and how amazing it is with someone just telling you about it. But I feel like, if someone were to experience it really and the process and going through it completely transformative from a business sense and just really going from, I think most entrepreneurs, their lives and businesses feel quite chaotic. And to me, having experienced traction as an employee on the leadership team, and now we use some elements in my current business, to me, it brings order to chaos is I guess the simplest way that I can put it from someone who's experienced it. So so we understand what EOS is. So then what is your role? And like, who do you work with and how does it work when you work with them?
Got it. So I have 3 functions in this process. I'm a teacher, I'm a facilitator, and I'm a coach. One thing very directly I am not is a consultant. Okay. I have 40 years of multi-unit management behind me, which is why my work with franchisees seems like such a great fit. Okay. Because I've run as many as 130 units at a time in a non-franchise environment, but you still have those same issues, right? Trying to get everybody rowing in the same direction, delivering the same service, et cetera, in multiple states. So my role when I engage with a client first is to teach the EOS system, right? To give context. Here's what the tools are. This is how they're used. So I teach that, and I teach it very repetitively because people need to hear things over and over again. And we talk about that all the time in the EOS world. I facilitate the 3 foundational days that we work together, and that's really educational and helping people to understand what that is and setting them up for the 90-day world in which they're going to live in. Okay, and we can talk about that more in a bit. But I facilitate the meetings. That allows the leadership team to sit down and be fully engaged in the discussion. Half of the battle I find when I implement with teams is they think they've had these really in-depth discussions about a lot of aspects of their business. In reality, they actually haven't sat down and come to any kind of consensus on a lot of the areas of their business, right? So having an outside facilitator, keeping them on track, making sure they're answering those questions and facilitating to an answer and an action plan, really important what I do. Okay. And then finally, I'm a coach. Right now, I'm working with 16 individual EOS clients. Okay. All industries. I have a boat builder. I have a company that executes triathlons, sign company, dental practice, a demolition company. It doesn't matter. Okay. But I get to see how all of those companies are operating. And like any sports coach, I have a coach for my practice. I believe that's very important for every entrepreneur. Should have somebody coaching them, looking at what they're doing. It got to be a sounding board. I'm the guy that's going to watch you run your business, and I'm going to give you feedback on what I see that maybe you're not executing as well as you should, and I'm going to help you to get better at that. So it's teacher, coach, and facilitator.
Yeah, awesome. And so what is it, a specific size business? Who is a good fit for EOS, and who's a good fit to, hire like you as an implementer? Because that's a technical term, right? That from
Yeah.
an EOS standpoint, you're an implementer.
Yes, I'm a certified EOS implementer. And our target market, and at about 80% of all the clients that EOS, whether it's me or any of my peers, operate in, it's 10 to 250 people. That's about 80%, and we say that's target market. 80%, 10 to 250 people. I have a couple clients that are smaller than that. When I ran the catering company, we had 400 employees. So it works on bigger companies, but usually bigger companies have enough infrastructure in place that they don't need the EOS model. Okay, we're there to help that small and growing company, small to medium size. And we're also looking for the mindset of the leadership team. Okay, it's got to be a privately held company, and the leadership team needs to be open and honest and willing to be vulnerable with themselves and with me. If they show up with, yeah, we know what we're doing, our PE firm's forcing us to do this, that's a terrible fit, right? I also have great concerns about working with nonprofits, because the mindset of a nonprofit is really different than the mindset of a growing entrepreneur. So, it's only with hesitancy that we take on nonprofit organizations, because they are not entrepreneurs. We're meant to work with entrepreneurial companies, privately held.
My intention with this podcast is to help you build your empire. If you've gotten a single piece of value, one of the best ways you can help me and the podcast is to simply press the like button on YouTube. Lastly, share this podcast. Share it with someone who who is an empire builder. Imagine the impact you can have by helping them learn something that can build their business and empire. People will associate the value they got from this information from you, the person that shared it with them, all because you shared it with them. I appreciate you and your support. Let's get back to the episode. So for a franchisee or a multi-unit franchisee, what does the process look like for them in terms of working with you or working with EOS? Explain to us, okay, you start out, what do they start doing? What's that process look like? And what's the end result? What's the transformation, so to say?
Gotcha. So go figure, we have a process, because we teach process. We work on process. Our first session with every client, and it's completely free, is what we call the 90-minute meeting. And in that 90-minute meeting, I give you a little background on EOS, a little background on myself, and I do a little dive into the company that I'm talking to. I need to pull some information out. I need to learn about them so I know best how to present the information and help them. And then we spend about an hour going through the EOS model. What do the tools actually look like? What is it going to look like, and how are you going to use them? And then I spend about 10 minutes explaining exactly what I'm explaining now. What's the process? We call it the proven process. So if after that, I leave at that point and I let the team talk about it, because I don't expect, this is not a sales process. It's an education process. If you decide you want to work with me or any implementer, our first step is scheduling what we call focus day. There are 3 days where we work with clients within 60-day window, okay? Focus day, vision building 1, vision building 2. In focus day, we give you the basic structure of the tools. We take first pass at your accountability chart. We take a first pass at your scorecard. We teach you how to run an effective leadership team meeting we call an L10 meeting. Okay. And we set rocks, which are business priorities. It's the first set of rocks. You walk out of focus day, and the following week, you start meeting and using the EOS tools because that's the basic structure of it. You're going to hold your first L10 meeting. And in the next 30 days, you're going to kick the tires. You're going to figure out what you know, what you don't know. It's like going to the gym and learning a new piece of equipment. You got to use it, got to figure out how it works, and start building those muscles of how to use the EOS tools.
So I want to unpack that a little bit, the
Sure.
focus day a little bit. So, okay, so you do this focus day. You mentioned an L10 meeting, a level 10 meeting. So
Yeah.
what's a L10 meeting, and what's the difference between that and a normal meeting that, an entrepreneur might have with their team, et cetera?
Gotcha. A level 10 meeting in EOS world, we call it a level 10 meeting because the last thing we do as a team is we rate the meeting 1 to 10. 10 means it was a great meeting. We worked well together as a team. We stayed focused, and we moved the ball down the field is the parlance that I like to use. Okay. You fix things and you address them and move the company forward. Okay. If at the end of that meeting you rated a 5, you have to explain it. So 8, 9, and 10, that's my feedback. And the purpose of rating a meeting is it's a self-correcting mechanism. Okay. So if it's 8, 9, or 10, it's not perfect. It's good. 10's a great score. 7 and below, you as a member of that leadership team has to explain why. So, we spend time going down 3 rabbit holes instead of staying on the agenda. For example, might be a good thing to point out to people so that next week you're better at it. Okay. And an L10 meeting is really this. There's a lot of opportunities to have meetings within any entrepreneurial company. This is one of the most important hour and a half that any team will spend together because it's a problem solving meeting. So we spend the first 20 minutes of that getting everybody on the same page, right? We do a check-in, personal, professional best. We just change the transition. We segue, as we call it, into a new mindset out of our normal day-to-day. We review our scorecard numbers. No discussion. It's a snapshot in time. Here's revenue, here's margin, here's number of leads converted, et cetera, whatever it is that's appropriate for that team. But you're going to review those numbers, okay? Snapshot in time, everybody's on the same page. We're going to review the rocks. Are you on track for completion of your track, or do you need help, okay? Either one of the scorecard numbers or rocks that are off track become an issue for us to talk about later in the meeting. Third is customer employee headlines. So that's sort of a catch-all. It's a 1 or 2 sentence. We signed client X, just wanted you all to know. Okay. You want to talk about it more? We put it in the issues list. So it's really just getting everybody on the same page. We review what we call to-dos, and to-dos are 7-day accountability measures to make sure things don't fall through the track. Last week, when we saw problems, when you solve a problem, there's usually some action. You got to make a phone call. You got to change a policy. You have to have a conversation with somebody. We record what they are and who's going to do them, so that a month from now, when I was supposed to go make a phone call, I don't go, I never talked to that customer, right? So it's really just another one of those little level tools that is part of EOS to make sure things don't fall through the cracks. And then out of that 90-minute meeting, we spend 1 full hour solving problems using the IDS methodology, which is identify, discuss, and solve, okay? We may solve 1 problem, we may solve 10 problems. And we call it the issues list, and don't get caught up in the term issues. Not every problem, not every issue is a dumpster fire. It could be, hey, I got a great idea I want to talk about with the team, or I need to really give you an update on this project I'm working on, okay? 5 minutes before the meeting's over, because part of the agenda of an EOS L10 meeting is it's same day, same time. Really important. The only reason you miss an L10 meeting is you're on vacation or you're dead, okay? It's sacrosanct, right? If 2 members of the team are on vacation and 2 are there, you have an L10 meeting, right? But 5 minutes before the meeting's over, starts on time and ends on time, right? So the ends on time piece is really important because a lot of times people really fight going to meetings knowing that they're going to cascade into the rest of the day. We don't have that. who's ever facilitating the meeting, it could be mid-sentence. Sorry, 5 minutes, done. It goes back on the issues list. And we do three things. One, we review all the to-dos that got assigned. They just get read out to make sure everybody's clear on what they have to do when they walk out the door. We talk about, is there any messaging that we as this leadership team of this company needs to disseminate to the rest of the company? And we speak with one voice. So what is the message and who's going to disseminate it and how is that going to happen? And sometimes it's, we're not going to talk about this with anybody because we haven't figured it out. We don't want to confuse people, right? And then finally, we rate the meeting. So the L10 meeting, we believe, has to happen every week. It is one of the most effective tools in the EOS toolbox to help you move your company down the road. If you solve new problems every week, that's the differentiator between your average entrepreneurial company and a high-functioning entrepreneurial team. If you're a high-functioning entrepreneurial team, you solve new problems each and every week, and that's how you're moving the company down the road.
Yeah, that meeting structure alone is a game changer. And you mentioned scorecard, which is essentially your KPIs. And
Yeah.
what I've have found is that the average business owner doesn't even have KPIs. They don't
Yeah.
even they don't. Yeah, how can you keep score if you don't know what you're keeping score of?
Yes,
Could be
absolutely.
new leads, it could be new appointments, it could be like customer satisfaction. But especially, franchisees who may have one or two or three locations or whatever it is, they're just stuck in the day-to-day of their business and just kind of treading along. So how can, because you mentioned that this process uh okay for a company with 10 to 250 people, how can a franchisee that maybe has 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 locations, how can they benefit from EOS? Is this something that they can self implement, or should they seek an implementer? What's your insight on that? What if someone says, well, I got 3 to 4 employees, how does that work?
Well, as a community, we are very supportive of the self-implementer folks that are out there. We run a convention every year. We run town halls. We do a lot of free work with self-implementers because if everybody who wanted to implement, every small to medium-sized business wanted an implementer, there's not enough of us, right? So on the EOS website, there's a lot of tools. They're free, and there are all the books. Self-implementing is definitely an option, and I give the analogy that says if you want to self-implement, you're going to get there. It's like getting on a Greyhound bus in New York and you're heading to California. Eventually, you're going to get there, and that's okay. But if you want to get on the private jet and have the tour guide, that's when you would have an implementer. If you feel like you have the ability to stop and focus on learning the process yourself through reading the book or using the tools, there's also something we call Basecamp, and that's on the EOS Worldwide website. If you can dedicate one person, you can join Basecamp for, I believe it's $500 a month, and you get a lot of the teaching and learning materials that I use, okay? The problem always is these small to medium-sized companies don't necessarily have the opportunity to dedicate a person to drive it, okay? So they can do that. But if you're going to be a self-implementer, what I suggest to people is start with the tool we call the Vision Traction Organizer. And that's where you get your vision of your company really clarified for your team. If you do nothing else and get that started, and you don't have to do a full implementation as a self-implementer, right? Use that tool, really important. When I do a 90-minute presentation to a client that first session, I hand them the document and I tell them, if you don't ever work with me, here, do this. Answer these 8 questions, because that way you are, at least as a team, you're on the same page. And you can tell your team, everybody that's not on that leadership team, where you're going, right? Because they're going to make well-meaning decisions, but if they don't know where you're driving the business, they're not there behind you in the caravan driving with you, right? They're going in circles because they're going to do the best they can.
Yeah.
So they can do that self-implementation in bits and pieces as they grow.
Yeah, and the cool part is, if you're too small, you self-implement, and then you get big enough where then you can hire an implementer, and that would be awesome. So really, we're talking about folks that are multi-unit franchisees and franchisors. So let's break that down. Let's start at the top. How can a franchisor utilize EOS, and how does that benefit them within the franchise system overall? Because their goal is to grow, primarily to grow the franchise system and help franchisees be more profitable and successful.
Sure. So just a couple notes is, one, EOS is a franchise. I'm a franchisee. Okay. There's about 750 of us around the world. The IFA, of which I'm a member, is also running on EOS. So they recognize the value of doing that. So if you're a franchisor, you're probably spending the bulk of your time focused on providing systems so that you can, whatever you're selling, product, service, you can teach that and support that when you sell to a franchisee, right? The problem is when you get to 3, 4, 5 units that you're talking about, you may not have the infrastructure in place for that franchisee to be able to understand how best to manage their business, right? Because the business of running all those franchises is different than executing the product of service. So a franchisor who's focused completely on trying to sell more units, expand and support the franchise base that they have, they very often don't have the tools themselves to stop, ask themselves the right questions on where they want to be as a franchisor in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Where are they driving their franchise? Where are they driving their entrepreneurial business? So first and foremost, a franchisor, it's a great fit. It's a different business model than their franchise. Combined, there's great synergies. Then you have the franchise, multi-unit franchisee. So I'm a franchisor and I've got 50 locations out there, maybe more, it doesn't matter. And I've got a couple of my multi-unit franchisors who have 3, 4, 5 units at this point, and they're stuck. Meaning they've reached that point of bottleneck because, okay, we got a lot of plates in the air, right? But we don't have the business system that gives us the comfort and the ability to make sure that we, again, have the right people in the right place, the systems in place. Because basically what you're running up here with 3, 4, 5 units, you're running a holding company, right? You have individual unit managers probably, but you got somebody who's overseeing operations day to day. You've got a sales and marketing function. You've got a finance function that sits on top of those 3, 4, 5 units. So what you're doing is bringing that as your leadership team, that holding company, and the owner of the franchises or owners to be able to best manage that. Now, there's two things. A multi-unit franchisor could independently decide, hey, I've heard of EOS and I want to just do an implementation. The other piece is, if I'm a franchisor and I've got these 50 or 60 or whatever number of units, and I see that I have multi-unit franchisors who can't take on any more organic growth within our system because they've maxed. How do I support them? Well, you might introduce them to EOS, and you might find a way to structure a financial incentive, whether you give them a credit on their franchise fees for the first year of an EOS implementation so that they are incented. They feel your love as a franchisor to franchisee. I'm trying to help you be more successful. And at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is help that franchisee to be able to take on more units because they're more effective. So there's two use cases right there for EOS with the multi-unit franchisor and the franchisee.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast episode so far. One of the most consistent things that we hear from people that reach out to us is that buying a franchise feels really confusing. There's so many options out there. It's a scary decision. They don't know how to vet or do the due diligence or really narrow down on the right franchise for them. And then they really feel alone in the process. You might be the only one in your family who's ever pursued buying a franchise or being an entrepreneur. Or maybe you've tried to start a side hustle before, or other businesses like me, like before franchising, I was not able to crack the code on entrepreneurship. I'd like to invite you to reach out and work with us. We've helped many clients buy franchises, get them profitable, or buy resale businesses that are thriving. Talking about highly profitable resales, great value. We've allowed many of our clients to actually quit their job right away and replace their income immediately. So if you want to work with me and my team on finding or buying a franchise, doing due diligence, vetting it, or resale, then go ahead and go to tariqjohnson.com/consulting, and we're happy to see if we can help. All right, enjoy the rest of the episode. Yeah. And so for, some franchise, let's say a multi-unit franchisee potentially that has, 3 or more locations, they may, in my experience, they may have some fractional seats, meaning they may have someone who's over marketing, but maybe they're outsourcing that, right? Where it's not quite a fractional CMO, but maybe they're using contractors in some of those roles. Can they still benefit from the EOS system and have, someone who's in a fractional role sit on their leadership team? Like what does that look like for some of those entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. One of the tools we teach on Focus Day is the accountability chart. And that accountability chart is an exercise that starts with a blank whiteboard and says to your team, what are the roles that we need in our company for the next 6 to 12 months to better manage and grow our organization? Okay. So for example, just had a company that had a fractional sales manager contracted to handle the sales function. Very often you have the owner who is sat in the sales function because he or she usually grew the business. But when they've gotten to a certain point and their Rolodex is empty, they're not trained salespeople, right? So you bring a fractional person in for a short-term period of time very often in order to set up your sales systems and so forth. They can and do sit on your weekly L10s as part of their job to contribute and represent in the leadership team meetings what the sales function needs to contribute strategically to the growth of the company. That's how you use fractional people. If you've got an outsourced marketing firm that's doing marketing, for example, somebody on the leadership team is going to own managing them. So they can be completely outsourced, but when it comes to having a meeting for your leadership team on a weekly basis and somebody has a marketing question, the person that sits in the marketing seat for the leadership team who manages the outsourced person can then speak intelligently about it. It's very common to have a finance seat on a leadership team. Somebody's got to manage the money because if they don't, you're going to be an accidental nonprofit. Okay, so you got a finance person, and if you got a CFO, your CFO's, you got a CPA doing your taxes and paying your payroll and doing all that stuff. They're not going to sit on your leadership team, but the person that's managing that outsourced work will sit on your team. So you can either have fractional people actually physically sitting in your meetings, or somebody on your leadership team who's managing them is going to represent them every week at the leadership team meeting.
Yeah. And so the concept of, and we've used it. So this is how we operated it. In my current business is, we have some folks that are maybe full-time contractors or some folks that are fractional in a sense. And it's worked out great for us for me, not having the pressure of trying to figure everything out on my own has been really transformational.
Yes.
Right? Because most entrepreneurs, they're trying to figure out all the ideas, and oftentimes the proprietor ironically enough, doesn't have the best ideas or way to go about it and execute, right? I mean, is that what you see?
Absolutely. And I often talk to my clients about who's going to do this, not how are you going to do it, right? Dan Sullivan, great thought leader in the business world, wrote a book, Who Not How, right? Incredible. So when you change your mindset to, I've got a team of 10 people, I got a team of 50 people, I got a team of 100 people, right? Who is best suited with their skill set to actually do this? I don't have to figure it all out. I got smart people that work for me. One of the things that's really important to understand in an EOS implementation, and I tell people this often, whether you're 10 people or 5 people or you're 250 people, only 20% of the value of EOS resides with the leadership team, because I, as an implementer, work with the leadership team to teach them all the tools. But at the end of the day, to be fully effective and gain all of the traction, pardon the pun, that you're going to be able to get out of the system, is the departments are going to then be trained on how to use those tools, because they're so simple. All right, they're practical. So the head of operations is going to teach the operations team in the field how to use those tools, what the accountability chart means to them, what a scorecard means for that department. Okay, what rocks can be taken on. Here's an example. I've got two companies of 100 or more people. One is a home builder. Okay, and that home builder has 175 employees, and they are about 15 months into their EOS journey. All right, so we have now pushed down the EOS world throughout their organization. Last quarter, they set 140 rocks out of 170 people, and rocks are business priorities that are clearly defined with a deliverable at the end of that 90-day period. All right, if you got a project that's taken a year, what am I going to commit to for 90 days? I'm going to drive it. I may not do all the work, but I own it. Okay, so in their company, only 15 months into this already, they did 140 rocks they committed to. They executed 70% of them. Our goal is to get to 80% or above. And again, they're still growing in the US world. But if you think about that, they were able to clearly define and execute over 100 clearly defined business priorities in that quarter alone. So think about that, 400 or 500 of those things. And that's because we rolled it out to other levels of the organization. Everybody's engaged, everybody's rowing in the same direction. And that's where you're really getting the traction and growing your business, because people understand where you're going and they're contributing.
Yeah, I see what you did there, getting the traction.
Yeah.
It's
It's not just the orange shirt, let me tell you.
It's interesting because here's what happens typically as a business owner. I mean, you see it, but it's like, this is why this is so powerful, is most business owners, your brain is spinning all day long,
Yes.
nonstop, with
Yep.
ideas, with thoughts, with plans.
Yep.
Maybe sometimes you're putting pen to paper, or it ends up on a to-do list somewhere,
Yep.
or in my case, multiple to-do lists that are scattered throughout,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so it's never, those tasks are never clearly there in one place,
Yep.
and then thoughtfully gone through to go, okay, well, what's the highest leverage for this year, this quarter? What actually moves the needle? And then
Yes.
without using a process like this, like EOS, instead they're working on the 80% that only generates 20% of the results, as opposed to working on the 20% that
Yep.
generates the 80% of the results.
Yes, that is where the facilitation comes in, because one of the things that we teach and talk about is prioritization. We say that as a leadership team member, you've got to be a good predictor. And each quarter, you've got to be a better predictor because you learned what you were able to predict in the last quarter. So let me give one other piece here in this process. We lay foundational work, okay? Once that foundational work is done, and again, that happens in approximately 60 days, we move to what's called the 90-day world, okay? That means the leadership team, once every 90 days, has to stop, right? They have to lift their heads up, come together as a team. And the purpose of that is they have to look back at the last 90 days. They have to be thoughtful and say what went well, what didn't go well, but most importantly, what did we learn from that? You have to force yourself to get in that 90-day habit of what went well, what didn't go well, because learning from that sets you up now. All right, 90th day, we're in this meeting. We now have that learning. Are we on track for our vision? Just making sure we're still heading in the right direction. And then we spend the balance of the day prioritizing what has to happen in the next 90 days. Okay, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I'm there as an implementer as long as you need me to learn that process, and then I get the heck out of your way, right?
And how long are those meetings, those quarterly meetings?
They're a full day. We tell
A full day.
clients 7 hours plus or minus an hour because we're only
Wow.
together once every 90 days. Now, as an implementer, I'm always available for a phone call. I have a call today with one of my newer clients who had a question about bringing somebody new on and how that interrelates with EOS. And we always have those opportunities. But really, the work is done in 90-day bites. Teams tend to fragment after 90 days. They're not able to stay focused. So it's really, and coincidentally, there's 4 90-day periods in a year. So we take bites at that apple where we're growing the company every 90 days. And smaller teams, it's a little less. Larger teams, the ideal team size is 5, 6, 7. Much bigger than that really doesn't
For a
work.
leadership team, you're saying?
On a leadership team, yes.
Yeah.
Bigger than that, and there's a lot of dynamics on teams that really doesn't lend itself to be effective.
And do these meetings have to be virtual? I mean, have to be in person? Can they be virtual?
There are people that do these meetings virtually exclusively. I've done virtual meetings, and I'm glad to do them. Ideally, I would rather be face-to-face. I like the energy of being in the room. I like the energy and the opportunity to be able to feel the emotion and the sense what's going on so that I can more effectively facilitate the meeting for them. So the virtual, there are people that absolutely work virtually and love doing that. I can do virtual sessions. I started my business practice as EOS during COVID, so I had to. My preference is face-to-face. So I will drive 4 hours to do a day with a client and have done that. I also, for example, last week did a presentation for a client in Cleveland that was referred to me. And for the right client, I'll get on an airplane because I think it's important to be in the room to get the feel of the emotion, to understand the ability of the team to interact. Because I know on a Zoom call of 8 or 9 hours, I'd rather do dental surgery. So you got to really be good at those 7, 8 hour events. I'd rather get on a plane.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, so level 10. Let's go hopping back to that. What's interesting to me is that winds up not just being for the leadership team, right? At some point,
yes,
you have departmental meetings. So how does that process work, and what's the importance of that?
Got it. So leadership teams should be focused on things at the high level, solving problems that are appropriate for the leaders. Okay, you as leaders do 2 things really importantly. You've got to set a strategic direction for the company, and you've got to solve problems to move the company forward. Within that process, we call it a meeting pulse, and every team is unique. For example, my practice, I have 2 part-time employees that I work with. Our sequence of, or our cadence of having meetings is once every 2 weeks for an hour. The only clearly defined, really non-negotiable in my mind is the leadership team needs to meet for 90 minutes every week, same time, same day, okay? But as you move down the level within, so you got leadership team, you've got department, depending on the size, you've got teams that report to that department, you may have a 4th or 5th level, right? Everybody should sit in an L10 meeting of some semblance every month, okay? And it could be that simple. At the very basic, I have a construction company where I got 3 guys on the back of a pickup truck doing an L10 meeting once a month, and it's 20 minutes long, okay? So they have an opportunity to look at their numbers, their scorecard, their rocks, and problem solve. The only absolute is 60% of their time. So 15 minutes of that 20 minutes is problem solving. You don't want to be solving problems that belong at the team level at the leadership team. It's micromanagement, right? I have a large team, again, the home builder. One of the first questions they ask when they are in their L10 meeting and somebody puts a issue on the list, is this appropriately solved at this level or does it belong elsewhere? So they've just made it part of their filter, if you will, to make sure they're spending their time as efficiently as possible. So you're going to decide at the department level, okay, is it every week? Is it every other week, right? Is it an hour? Is it 45 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? Whatever's unique for that and appropriate for that team, that's how long you have your meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, and is it limited to, let's say, if you have two people on your marketing team, can they still run an L10 meeting if it's two people?
Absolutely.
How many people are needed?
Two people really is what it amounts to. So you have the department head at marketing and whoever reports to them. And it could be an outside vendor, right? Because they're going to have a unique scorecard for that department, right? So, what are the numbers that tell the marketing department week to week that they are on track? Because the scorecard in EOS, there's a lot of data out there. We have a full component. It's one of the 6, right? So the scorecard is really, if you think about it, it's a windshield of your car, right? The numbers that are on any team's scorecard are telling them, are we on track, right? They're leading indicators so that it gives you as this team member the opportunity to avoid pitfalls and not go in the ditch, okay? A lagging indicator, and as I explained to most of my teams, would be your financials, right? I want you to look at your financials, but you're not going to do that every week because you're not going to adjust every week based on that. You're looking at the things that are appropriate to make sure that your financials are improving over time, right? So the marketing department is going to have numbers that are relevant to them. The finance department, like AR and how long that is, how far that's out, et cetera. Everybody has their own information that's relevant. And what happens is, since you have the head of the marketing department sitting in the department meeting, right? If something's up here and the leadership team says marketing should handle that, that gets brought to the marketing team L10. And if you hit a ceiling in the marketing team L10, where they don't have the business awareness to be able to solve it, they don't have the authority to spend the money to solve it, that department head brings it back up to the leadership team. I always tell people, remember the old game Chutes and Ladders, right? Because there's always a level above and below. If you're a supervisor, you should sit in 2 L10 meetings a week, okay? One, the leadership team, and the department you supervise. And then that person in that department is going to sit in the department meeting and whoever the teams that report to them. So you have that connection up and down the ladder so information gets to the appropriate level.
Yeah. And have you ever had a time where some business owner said, like, I don't want to share that information with my company or with my team, or they want to keep the information private? What sort of wisdom do you impart there? How do you respond to that?
I especially at the leadership team level, and this is not pure EOS, and I'll be honest, I tell teams all the time, if you are not, as a leadership team, every month having a financial review, because these are the people that are running your business and making decisions, right? Just every week we check in so we have a snapshot in time. At least once a month, you got to look at the financial statements. And if you don't understand how to read them, you have to learn if you're on the leadership team, okay? Really important. So if you're an owner who doesn't want to share information, you are handcuffing people who are driving your business. And I got a great example. I had one of my early teams where I made this assertion to the leadership team. And the owner, probably third meeting in, says, okay, we have $7,000 in the bank and we are $300,000 in debt. And I was afraid to tell you guys that, because I didn't want to scare you off. They were really not in a great financial position. He also didn't want to necessarily share it with me. But he finally fessed up. And in that meeting, we had a great discussion because they were a printing company. So, and I used the analogy at that point. You're head of your department. Instead of buying 3 months worth of supplies because your cash flow is so tight, maybe he's only buying it a week or 2 at a time. They're now informed. They can better manage your business and help you. If you blindfold people to what's going on in the business, then they can't really make great decisions. It's like playing football without being able to see the end zones, right? We'll tell you how you're doing, but if you can't see the end zones, how do you score, right? So you really have to share. And I very often say to leaders, use some analogies, because everybody thinks you're rich as an owner. okay? That you're just living hand over fist. Cash is piling in, right? If you do nothing more than do the explanation, if you have 100 pennies kind of discussion. So out of 100 pennies, we bring in out of every dollar, right? So much of that goes to pay the rent. So much of that goes to payroll. So much of that is cost of goods. At the end of the day, out of every dollar, we only have 7 pennies left, right? So if you even get them to that point where they understand it, they're going to be much better informed. And once teams understand a little bit about the financial structure of the company and how that can impact the success of the company, they are much better at making decisions for you. Still, some are hesitant to give them any information. And all I can do is teach pure EOS, right? People
Yeah.
make their decisions, and sometimes over time they come to the conclusion that we really need to start sharing some of it. But it's definitely a mindset that some people don't like doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because what I find is that, people want to be private, and for whatever reason, I have a buddy that he had a fire and water restoration business, built it to be a quite successful business, 12, $13 million a year in sales revenue, and actually recently sold it to a private equity company after about 10 years. And um he had used kind of a hybrid of EOS and what is it, The Great Game of Business, I think that book is called, which I think has some similar philosophies overall. And yeah, he would say that they would share the full P&L with the company and their team, and explain how that impacted them, and had incentives based around that. And he said it really changed the culture of their team and their business overall. And I think, most owners are afraid that, for whatever reason, like you said, it could be the situation is bad, it's dire, or they don't want the team to know how much money they're making. But I agree. I think the benefits certainly outweigh any potential challenges. Last thing I want to cover is, did you want
I
to
just,
say
if I
something
could
there?
make a point, because you made a comment about there's all kinds of business systems out there, right? And I'm going to tell you EOS isn't for everybody. We in EOS, if you expect to have that moment where you go, oh my God, you found Nirvana, you're gonna solve all of our problems. All right. I tell people there is no silver bullet, there is no magic pill here, right? The beauty of EOS is there's a lot of good things out in the world. And the beauty of EOS is that we put them into one integrated system, right? So if you do EOS, or if you read the book Traction that it's based on, there's a lot of things that you've heard bits and pieces about, right? We put them into that one 6 component model. And you talked about those 100 things bouncing around in everybody's head, and the how you manage that. Once a quarter, I call it a data dump. Everybody's got to stop and write them all down, right? And then we decide what is the appropriate prioritization, what gets done this quarter, what gets done next quarter, what gets done next year. So that's all part of that cohesive model. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, all good. Yeah, I think that's the great distinction. And as you were saying that, a couple things pop in my head is in terms of analogies. It's like having a physical blueprint for your business. It's like, wow, it's all there in one place, one stop shop. And it's like having the recipe for your business in a more simple analogy. It's like you see the recipe, you see the all of the ingredients that are needed and what quantities and amounts, and now it's your job to follow the recipe.
It, it,
Yeah, I think it's an amazing system.
it also provides a permission structure for a lot of entrepreneurs to know that they're not flailing in the dark, that they're making conscious decisions that are thoughtful, that are data driven, that are part of a cohesive decision making process. And it relieves a lot of people's anxiety, because they often are making decisions as best they can. They don't know, they don't have any reinforcement, and this helps them with that.
Yeah. All right, last thing I want to cover is the concept of right person, right seats. To me, this was It's so simple but incredibly profound. So what is it? And maybe give me an example of, how you've seen it in play with maybe a client that you've worked with.
Okay. So one of the 6 components of EOS is the people component. And the 2 tools that we use under the people component are right person, right seat. Right people, let me stop for 1 second. 80% of all of your problems in running your business reside in the people component, right? 80%. That's over 20 years of experience, 20,000 plus companies with implementers, and another 150 or 180,000 that we have just garnered information from. So 80% of your problems are in that people component. Right people are people who share your values. And part of what we do in the vision component of EOS is discover what the real values. Every company has values, whether they've defined them or not, right? So we do a discovery exercise when we do the vision component. We identify what are the 3 to 7 values that you run your business on. Okay, what's important? Integrity, teamwork, whatever they are. Humility sometimes. That's one of ours. Humbly confident. So right people share your values, because if somebody doesn't share your values, they are not reinforcing your culture, and that can be a cancer in your organization, especially for new employees who are being exposed to people who don't share your values, because those people that don't share your values are not reinforcing your culture, right? So right people share your values. You hire, you fire, you reward, you review people based on them sharing their values. So you have to share values to be a right fit for the seat. So every seat is a role that we define. Here's the example of what a role is. And I always use this. Most people understand what a quarterback in football is, right? So the role, it's not who's sitting in there. The role is defined as quarterback. What does the quarterback do? Calls plays, throws the ball, runs the ball, responsible to score, etc. Everybody knows then at a high level what the quarterback is. Now, when we're looking to put somebody into that quarterback seat, does that quarterback share our company values? Okay, we can measure that using a tool called the People Analyzer. And then, do they get, want, and have the capacity to execute that role? I would not be a good professional quarterback because I can't throw a ball. Okay, I don't know a lot about it. I'm not trained as a quarterback. So I don't get one and have the capacity. And let me tell you what that means. Get it means that the synapses in your brain all work and understand, if I'm sitting in the quarterback role, how my role interacts with other people, right? That's gets it. Wants it, pretty easily defined. If you have somebody in a job, and sometimes that happens, people get shunted into a job that they don't really want to do. How effective is somebody that is in a job that they don't really like? They don't want it, right? So you can ask somebody, do they want the job? Or you can observe how they're executing. Do they show up energized, looking to improve that job on a regular basis? Are they enthusiastic? Are they trying to get better? Or are they just putting in time? That's a good indication. And then capacity is not time capacity. Capacity here is, do they have the mental, physical, emotional ability to execute the job and the training? So I use the example all the time. If you're going to be a brain surgeon, somebody better have trained you how to cut into somebody's head, right? So gets it, wants it, and have the capacity. So the 2 things, right people, right seats, shares your values, gets, wants, and has the capacity. Okay. Now, you might have somebody that shares your values, but doesn't really fit the role of, and I use the quarterback example. I can't sit in that role. Maybe there's another role in the company I can move to. And I tell people all the time, sometimes everybody should sit in a role. Sometimes that role's in somebody else's company. Okay. And that's just the truth of it. And if you're not willing to do that, you go back to that accidental nonprofit issue. Okay. And then the other thing is, they really are good at their job, but they don't share your values. And again, you're a cancer. Okay. Because I use the example all the time. Have you ever worked with somebody who's really toxic in an organization? Somebody that people tiptoe around on eggshells? That person doesn't share your values. They may be great salespeople, but they're not helping your company. So we would say in EOS world, you need to figure out how to move that person out because they're going to, long term, they're going to hurt you. Gets, wants, has the capacity, and sharing your values. You got to have them both.
Yeah, it's incredible. And is it an EOS thing, the hire and fire on core values? Is that's
No, but well, yes, we use that. We've embraced that, but it is a Jim Collins thing that he came up with. Right people on the bus. Okay, so
mm,
again, we've cobbled together a lot of thought leaders, and we give full credit to all of them. But that is core to what we do in EOS. Right? And I will tell you, I've had teams that over time, I had a company that I just graduated out of my practice, and that's my goal, to graduate you so that you're able to go out and do that on your own. My goal is not to embed myself with your company forever, right? I get you up to speed and you go. They just graduated, but in the 2 years that I worked with them, their head of IT and their CFO self-eliminated because as the team coalesced around where we're taking the company, where we were really clear on what our vision was, both of them realized in themselves that they did not want to be part of that team. So they self eliminated. The other piece is I have another company that for their first year, we just completed their first year. So we had 3 days in foundational work and we've had a couple quarterlies. And they came to the conclusion, I actually pointed out that we have talked about the same 3 people on your team every single quarter and how you are tiptoeing around them, how you're worried about how they're going to take your decisions as leadership. And it's just sucking your time and energy and productivity. They finally made the decision last quarter. Those 3 people no longer are part of the company. So it's a real clarifying opportunity. And it doesn't happen overnight. It shouldn't, doesn't have to. Because if somebody's not sharing your values, for example, they may not be clear on what that means. So some education sometimes brings them up, makes it better fit. And then, if you've got 100 employees and you got 10 of them that aren't right people, right seats, you're not going to go out and fire all 10. I tell people, what's a good people decision change you can make this quarter? One. Make one. Every quarter, you're improving, right? You're taking that bottom person and how are you improving? What's a good people move you can make this quarter?
yeah, it's an interesting concept. And what I find is the hard decisions are often avoided or the tough
Yes.
conversations, right? And we recently had to part ways with someone in our business. And once I talked to the team about it, it was everyone was pretty much on the same page because that individual was impacting the culture of
Yes.
our team, the way they were showing up, etc. And so once it was done, I think there was a sense of relief on the team
Yes.
to protect the overall culture,
Yes.
right?
And what took you so long is often the question,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, for anyone that wants to get in contact with you, we'll have all of your links and contact information in the description and in the podcast and on the video. But any parting words that you want to say before we wrap up?
Sure. And I started with this is an educational process. So if you're a franchisor or a multi-unit franchisee and you just would like to learn, I'm glad to give you 90 minutes of my time. We'll hop on a Zoom call, or if you're local to me, I'll drive and meet you and I'll explain it to you and you can understand and be educated as to whether this is something that's going to help you. Okay. So I do that all the time. My peers do that all the time. Doesn't necessarily mean that we have to work together after that. I'm glad to educate you on EOS and point you towards the tools. Don't be hesitant. I will make time for you.
Awesome. Yeah, and I just to throw my 2 cents in, there's not a tremendous amount of things that I get really excited about and just genuinely think it's amazing. EOS is one of those things where it's just, it blows me away. It's incredibly powerful. I think it's just completely transformative, for business owners. And the more business owners that I talk to, the more I realize that a lot of them just they're treading water, not necessarily from a profitability standpoint, but just keeping everything together. And it's like they, things are kind of bandaged and duct taped together in terms of just the overall infrastructure of the business and the way things are operated. And there's this constant sense of like it can all fall apart at kind of, any given moment. And I think what EOS does is it provides structure. It's almost like instead of building a house of cards that you've taped together, it's like, okay, you're coming in with steel beams and concrete and bolts and really tightening things up. So you have this really, really strong infrastructure where if some tailwinds come through, everything's not going to come and kind of be wrecked. So those are my analogies.
Thank you. And I've had clients say to me, we want to do this because we're on such a growth trajectory that we realize if we don't build that infrastructure to support it, the house of cards will come down. So it really is a tool that allows you to build that structure in order for you to layer on top of it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for your time. It was great being here.
Absolutely. Hey, before we go, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And the biggest thank you that you could ever give me is to share this episode with someone who you think will benefit. That means that we can share this message with more people and hopefully positively inspire them like we have you. So thank you. And until next time, go build your empire.